Hey everybody, welcome. I'm Steve. I'm glad you're here. This is not going to be a tutorial. This is going to be based on giving beginners the direction that they need to figure out whether Blender or any 3D software is going to be a hobby or turn into a career. And in order to make that decision, we're going to go over 7 steps, all that may not apply to you, in a very easy fashion. We're also going to go over some of the interface, even though I'm not going to teach you the interface in this tutorial, give you a good idea of what you can expect and some of the things you're going to need to learn to kind of combine the skills and experience and time needed so that you can be productive in 3D, regardless of whether it's a hobby or a potential career. All right, so I'm all about transparency. So if you didn't know, I'm going to tell you. I'm 45 years old and I picked up 3D modeling 17 months ago. And I really just went through every tutorial that was out there. And, well, maybe not all of them, but I went through majority of them. And I found that it's very confusing to do that without a plan and just kind of tutorial hopping until you find the next great thing and you think you're going to be really good at it. Come to find out, you don't really know anything other than what you saw in that tutorial, and you can't reproduce it because you didn't build a skill set or a foundation first. And so we're going to go over a few things and do a step-by-step process. I'll try to keep the video pretty short. That way it's more informational and giving you some good direction. All right, the first thing you're going to want to do is grab a stable copy of Blender from blender.org. On the home page, they're going to have not only a download link for you, but they're going to have the latest non-crashing version of Blender. So if you click download, it's going to jump you over here. You could choose your operating system appropriately and download that version of Blender. Now, once you've got that installed, you're going to find yourself here. And there's a lot of buttons and there's a lot of different directions that you can go. Blender has, 5 or 6 different areas that you're going to be working in at any given time, no matter what you choose. So it's a good idea to be familiar with all of them and start the process of finding out what you actually want to do in Blender and what you like doing, because that's probably the most important thing. And another key thing to figure out is how much time can you put into Blender? Can you put in an hour a week, 2 hours a week, 5, 10 hours a day? What is it going to be? Is it going to be 30 minutes a month? None of that actually matters. The time frame doesn't matter because everybody's going to learn at their own pace. So give yourself that time and don't fall into the tutorial trap of someone who's teaching you something in a minute or learn Blender in 20 minutes. I promise that's not going to work, period. It's going to take you a long time. Some people come from different softwares, and it's a matter of figuring out the interface and where things are and what to do and how to navigate inside of it. And all of that is fine and good. But if you're coming in absolutely fresh and you don't even know how to move and pan around in the viewport, which is middle mouse, by the way, and that'll give you a pan, and middle mouse will help you zoom in and out. And those are like the first things you're going to learn. Yeah, those 3, 4, 5 minute tutorials are not going to teach you Blender. It's going to take a long time. And in some rare cases, I've heard of people learning it in 6 months, but I don't think you're going to be proficient in that. Like I said, unless you're coming from another 3D software, then that's a different story. All right, so let's learn this the easy way. Think about the buttons up here, starting with the layout and going all the way over to scripting as a scale of the easiest to the hardest. The layout would be the easiest to learn. Then if you come over to the modeling workspace, which is technically edit mode, then that would be a lot more to learn. And then if you came over to sculpting, you have lots of sculpting brushes and things to learn, tons of stuff there. And that's pretty difficult to get. And then if you go to UV editing, well, that's going to be even more difficult to get and grasp the concept of unwrapping a 3D model into a 2D. But one of the cool ways of actually figuring that out is think about like a piece of candy that is wrapped in foil. And if you were to perfectly unwrap that without ripping it and put it flat on the table, you're going to see a picture. And that is a 2D representation that can be placed on a 3D model. And that's kind of what this workspace is. And if any of that sounds confusing or hard, well, it's not that difficult once you get it, but it's definitely harder. Now, texture paint, we're not even going to touch that right now because I don't like how Blender does texture painting. You're going to probably want to pick up an add-on, but it is worth noting that there are some very powerful features within here that can get you started. Now, when you come over to the shading workspace, this is a whole different ballgame. You're going to have to learn a node-based shader setup if you want to do anything in here. Now, it's really cool though, because you could come in and you can start changing colors. And like I said, I'm not teaching you this, I just want to give a couple possibilities. And from here, you can throw in certain nodes. These are nodes with some inputs that are using wires that in the Blender community, we call them noodles. And you can connect these to create multicolor, multifaceted models. And then we've got some cool nodes in here that are gradient textures. And you can plug these colors in directly. And then, of course, you can learn how to do mapping in these and start to map these textures across the model. And then you have to learn a coordinate system, which is all really easy stuff. Actually, it's not that difficult. It generates some UVs for you. And then once you've got all that figured out, you can come in here and start modeling out some really interesting textures. And if you learn this properly, you know, there's a lot of people that become very, very skillful and masterful at doing this. And so if you understand anything about normals and things like that, then you'll be able to pick all this up very easily. And of course, like I said, don't freak out, not teaching, just showing some possibilities. And then you can show fake depth and all kind of stuff. You can create a lot of really, really cool effects. You can invert textures and all that. Now, once you've done that and you've figured out kind of like, yeah, oh, wow, that looks intriguing, well, that might be the path for you. Then you can come over to animation where you can learn keyframing. So if I wanted to, say, throw in a location rotation scale on this, and I want to rotate this, and I'll probably just move it over here so I could like rotate this and bring it up, and then insert another, let's actually scale it too. And insert a rotation scale setup, and then I can begin to learn basic animation. You see how easy this stuff is really, and you don't have to understand it all right now. Just kind of figure out what you want to do. And then when you come over to rendering, we're not going to go there because that's more of like a finished product. And compositing is a whole different setup. This is post-processing. So let's say you've created a scene, a picture, something really cool. You did a really neat 3D model scene and it's well lit. All your models are sound and your textures are great. It's not going to look too good without compositing and creating render layers and different things. And this will have nodes and things that you can dump in here that are literally just like the shader editor where you're pulling in nodes. So just understand Blender's got a lot of node-based stuff, just like Houdini. And they're really coming up too, especially with geometry nodes. So now if you come over to geometry nodes workspace, and a lot of people do their animation here because this is far more powerful. So if you were to take a 3D model of any type and you click new here, you can now start applying immediate procedural non-destructive effects here. So if I wanted to, do something to this, like I could distribute the points on the face. Okay, and I can create a neat little animation out of something like this, and then I can create instances because instances are pretty cool and they save a lot of space and render time. And then after I've done all that, I can throw in some kind of mesh primitive. I'll just throw in UV sphere and bring the radius down considerably. And then I'm going to go ahead and plug this into the instance. And as you see, we now have a bunch of little spheres that were in the actual shape of the original mesh. And then with a join geometry right here, and I know it sounds like I'm teaching, but I promise I'm not. Now you've got all these neat little spots on your mesh, and you can procedurally, non-destructively control all of them. And then materials, you'll need to learn something about them, so you can throw some materials in here. I believe I have that gradient material that I just made, and that was not correct. Let's put in a set material right here, just to intrigue everybody, and I'll go over to a material preview so you can kind of see what I actually made. And everything in here took that procedural material, and so now we could kind of like play around with this thing as we see fit. And if I wanted to just have these little procedural spheres in here, then I can do that. And then it gets really crazy from there. And then of course you have scripting, and there are some actual templates in here. So if you're into programming, you can do a lot of Python in here, and you can learn coding. And it's got some preset scripts. All you got to do is hit play and then figure out what they're going to do if you're into Python. But that, like I said, it goes from easiest to insane. And I'm not even going to kid around. Some of this stuff is extremely difficult, but it's easy enough over time. So once you get that time factor out of the way, you'll be able to figure it out. So where do you belong in these workspaces? I think there's like 11 of them, 11 or 12 of these. And that's not even all. That's just a small portion of what is possible inside of Blender. So if you were to come over here and split out your workspace, now you can have the shader editor up as you're viewing your materials, and so it gets really cool. You could do a lot of stuff in here, and it's very easy to learn. So what you would do is you would go find some tutorials that are based maybe on the shading editor. Okay, so material nodes inside of Blender, or if geometry nodes really perks your interest, check out geometry node tutorials, and then focus on learning your animation that way. And then you can get materials absolutely free with plugins. You don't have to make anything, because there's a false belief that you have to come in and learn everything in Blender. You don't have to do that. And if you do that, you're going to go crazy and you're going to quit. So that is the end of that portion. All right, for step 3, basic navigation. How do you do things inside of Blender? There's plenty of interface tutorials that are going to teach you that if you hold down Shift and middle mouse, you can move the entire 3D viewport, and if you hit middle mouse, you can pan in the viewport. And if you zoom, then you can, zoom in on certain aspects. If you hold down Control and middle mouse and go in and out, then you'll have the option of focusing a little bit better. Now, there's a lot of tips and tricks around this as well. So if I grab this object with either left or right click, depending on what you have set up here, if you have a system like you just installed Blender, then you're going to have some certain setups that are going to be very basic. And underneath the key map here, you'll be selecting with either the left or the right mouse. So if you're coming from another software, you may be left, you may be right. It doesn't matter. The spacebar is generally used for search, so you can start there. And if you don't have a save thing here, then that means you're on auto save. And if you feel good about it, you can just save your preferences like that anyways. Then you can grab an object and hit F to focus on it. And if you have multiple objects in the scene, and I just used Shift D with that selected to create a completely separate copy, and I can press Alt D to create an instanced copy, which saves a lot of resources, and you'll understand all of that later on. Then if I hit /, I can isolate that from all the other mesh objects. If I hit / again, pulls me back out. So there's a lot to learn, and I'm not going to go over all that right now, but absolutely pick up some interface tutorials and get comfortable with the 3D interface so you don't freak out, and know how to navigate. Understand you have viewport shading, which is the basic. Then we call this the workbench. It can't handle a whole lot. Then we have EV Engine, which is real-time rendering for the most part. And then we have Cycles Workspace, which ultimately is going to give you very real-world, realistic lighting, and requires quite a few settings to be set up over here underneath the render properties in the properties panel. And just so you know, you have the 3D viewport, then you have the outliner. This is going to contain everything that is in the blend file. And what I mean by that is not only objects, but cameras and other things. And you can click down to see what might be attached to the cube. I have an animation, what we just made, which is attached to the cube itself. Then the cube has a vertex group and it has a material. And it gets kind of confusing after that. You can individually select these different things. Then you have the properties panel, which takes you through the render properties, output properties, so you can do some rendering. You have view layer properties. That's going to tie into compositing. And so whatever you pull up over here, you'll be able to see some different passes. Like I said, if you come from different software, this could be very helpful to know immediately where this is under the view layer properties. So you can do all these different passes. And whenever you check one of these on and then you go to render and you render out an image, you're going to have that as an access over here. So if I render these, you can see I'm adding these extra selections as I go through, and all these will be different items you can plug into different nodes for different final effects in post-processing. All right, for step 4, so you don't have that freak out that definitely is coming for most people, I'll go ahead and minimize this and remove the color from all that. So we're in the solid workspace now. I can grab this object, and there's a different number of different things you can do. I can hit G to grab, and I can right click and let it go and it won't change. But if I hit G to grab and then left click, and you could be left or right, however you set it up, I don't know, and it'll take its new position. Then I can hit S and I can scale it to make it bigger, and I can hit R to rotate it. And then you can hit respectively X, Y, and Z to get all those different rotations. Very easy, and you can do that with all the objects. And if you hit A, you'll get all of them. You can scale them all at the same time, even though it's really not a purpose. And if you double tap A, you'll deselect everything. And those are some very, very basic things, just so you don't go crazy in the 3D viewport and you kind of understand what to do. All right, now time for step 5, just a little bit of basic modeling and object manipulation. You can come up here, go from object to edit mode, and you'll have 3 selections here to start with. You'll have vertices, you'll have edges, and you'll have faces. Whatever's highlighted blue is what you're currently using. So if we go to vertices and we right, we have this little tiny point right here. If you hit G, you can grab it and move. Another thing to note, it's really cool that the procedural geometry node setup that we added actually updates live as we're moving this, which is really cool. And then of course we have edges, which you can select here, and I'm going to turn on something here so that we can kind of see these a little bit better. I think we like that. That looks pretty good. There we go. So now you can see the vertice is going to be anything that's in the corner. It takes 3 or more of these to make a face, and the edges can be manipulated, and you can actually hit H to hide that and Control Z to go back. But if I just in edge mode and I select this and then hit Control B, I can now create what's called a chamfer. That's another type of bevel, and I can left or right click place that. And now I've just manipulated the mesh for the first time, which is really cool. Now let's go to face, and we'll work on the same face. You can hit I, and that is going to inset the face and create extra geometry along these vertices and create new edges according to how far in you actually scale these. Now, once you've done that, you can hit E to extrude this up or down, however you see fit. And we could just do something like that, and then tab. Well, tab may not take you into edit mode. You don't have that add-on, but you can go back into object mode and check out all the cool results. And that is a very, very basic overview of manipulating mesh objects. Now it's time for step 6. That is going to be finding resources that are going to help you learn Blender really quickly, how to find materials and how to find models that you can kind of practice on, because don't expect yourself to build a model and instantly be able to texture it. It's going to be a disaster. What you can do though is you can go get some free models, some free textures, see how it's done, and check out some of the node groups or different things like that. And as you go, pull up tutorials that are based on what you're seeking to do in Blender, whether it be a hobby or a hobby that's leading into a career, or just hardcore going to a career. And the most famous tutorial that everybody goes through in Blender would be Blender Guru's donut tutorial. Don't miss that one. I didn't do it for like the first 4 or 5 months and I regretted it. He's got 7, 8, 9, 15, 16 different courses available that are going to take you through what I showed you, all those different workspaces, and give you like the best tools and the things you're going to mainly use, because there's a ton of stuff in Blender you're never going to use. And this would be one of those resources. So go check out Blender Guru. He's got quite a few tutorials available for you. Then we have the Blender's main page. We got 1.05 million subscribers, and they go through all of the new updates in Blender, so you can stay up to date on new modeling practices and new features that are coming out. Then it's time for those models that are already preset. Oh my gosh. So you can come over to Sketchfab and you can get free models over here. So if you wanted, anything, just think it up. If you wanted to get a frog, well, there's pre-modeled frogs and they're pre-textured and they're ready to import into Blender in multiple formats, and you can learn all that through tutorials. So sometimes you're gonna have to cherry pick tutorials, and you have to find 2 or 3 good creators that are really pointing you in the right direction, and I'll show you a couple more in just a minute. And I will put the link for Sketchfab down below, but it's just sketchfab.com. Now for one of my favorite sites, polyhaven.com. Very easy to get to. They've got HDRIs, which are going to completely light your scene. Like, people go out with specialized camera setups and they take, panoramic photos that are meant to light your scene with real world lighting, textures, models. I think almost everything in here is free. You can definitely do some pay stuff, but there's a ton of free models in here. Anything that's blanked out is, early release. You'll have to pay for that, but all the rest of the stuff, you probably go through here and get most of this absolutely free. So just click download and enjoy. You need some more resources. So let's think about it like this. What do they specialize in, the tutorial creators that you're looking for? So if we go over to Joey Carlino, let's check out his page. Kind of come through here and figure it out. He models neat little characters and animates them and all that cool stuff. And so you can come through here and get some really unique modeling tips from him. And so he kind of covers a few different subjects, and I highly recommend him. Now for the next person that I have followed closely would be Josh Gramble. And if we go over to Josh Gramble's page, him and the Blender Bros, they really do a lot of work. I went through this course. This is a free hard surface modeling course. It is incredible and really jumped up my game big time. You can come through here and all the hard surface modeling, like that chamfer that we made, only times 1,000,000. And you can go through and check some of these videos and tutorials out if you like making weapons, sci-fi related things. And decaling instead of texturing is a big deal, and a lot of people do that. They don't texture so much. They do like really light texturing and then decal the rest of it, which is absolutely acceptable and looks amazing in the end. And then there's this one guy, the CG Essentials. Hey, what's up, guys? He says that before every video. It's classic. So this guy goes through and he literally just teaches you everything about Blender in a very practical, very slow paced, very easy to understand way. And for beginners, may actually be one of the best people next to Blender Guru.
With the CGEssentials.
Yeah, so we got to just play his intro one time.
What's up, guys? Justin here with the CGEssentials.com.
Yeah, he's a good dude. Go over there and check out his tutorials. Amazing. And if you are into 3D printing, actually, you could go in and check out MakerTails, because MakerTails, he goes in and I don't know if he made the add-on or not, but he's got a lot of really cool stuff that's based on 3D printing, and he does that live. He 3D prints live and shows you how to do it inside of Blender. So that would be one of my highest and tip top and only guys I would recommend for that. And he's got a cool add-on that plugs right into Blender, and it's actually pretty easy to learn. Then on to step 7, the final step. This is finding your path, and you are literally the only person that's going to do that, but I can point you in a good direction. What interests you? What are you spending the most time on? What are you searching for? What have you always wanted to do? Are you good at creating things? Are you good at fixing things? You're a painter? You might be into material shading. Take some complexities. If you're into math, you're going to really, really love geometry nodes, because inside of here, we've actually got math nodes with lots of computive power, okay? You've got drivers and all kinds of cool things. So you could literally come in, and I'll just grab this object and go back into the layout and go into like the object properties. And you could come in here and you can add drivers that do different things. And there's a lot of ways to get there. You can do paid courses, which are designed by the creators to accelerate your learning process to learn specific things really fast. You can find some tutorial creators who have a dozen or 24 tutorials that are based on one certain subject, and some of them, their entire channel is dedicated to that. So you really just gotta have like a little seeking process, go through and figure out what you actually want to do, what you enjoy doing. So you have programs out there like Maya, which are really based in the 3D modeling, and then you've got Houdini, which is a very big node-based. You can do a lot of animation with it. There's the D5 render engine, which like plugs into all the other ones and does a ton of animation and real-world lighting, and just throws physics and things like that, like rain and clouds and movements and all that stuff into your scene for you. So ultimately, Blender tries to take like the A to Z spectrum and do a little bit of everything really good. Some things they do better. Sculpting has really come up in Blender. The geometry nodes is not necessarily because of the computing power of Blender, and your own personal computer may not do the same results as Houdini, but it's actually coming up in a very close, it's closing in the distance for the capabilities and the different things you can do, because now we have simulation nodes and a bunch of other things. So you can basically just plug some things in, like some different mesh objects, and you can animate all these different things on here in different ways. All right, so a little bit about my path. For the first 6 months, I just tutorial hopped all over the place. I had no idea what I wanted to do. And then like 8 months in, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna start creating tutorials because I want to be a YouTuber, and I want to be able to, say, monetize my channel in the background, but give away free tutorials. And I ended up creating add-ons and learning how to create those. And so now I've got add-ons that do all kind of really cool things. They've got all kind of presets in them. You can just plug in automatic lights that have the color and everything all ready to go. You can have camera animations and different things like that are set up. And so I built this right here. This little workspace is mine. And what I did is I figured out how to pull all of the features out of all of these different menus, because there's over half a dozen little drop down boxes down here and different things going on and lots of different features. And then I figured out how to put them all in the scene. And so if there's a camera in the scene, I can actually grab the camera and automatically change the camera focal length. If there's a light in the scene, I can actually change the light intensity with my add-on, and you can see this little slider moving as I go. I guess we could show that. It's not so important actually for the tutorial, but just so you kind of see what I've been doing and the direction that I went. So I made add-ons that can do cool stuff like this, and I made my own pie menus, which are easy access to special features. And this little LM Studio, I made this as well. So you can pull out multi-lights, and there's all kinds of really cool features in here, so you can kind of manipulate the lights and move them around in different ways. So, you got to find your place, you got to find out what you're doing. I went from trying to teach 3D modeling to teaching about the updates in Blender, the interface, focusing on beginners and specialized projects, which led me to creating add-ons. So you never know where it's going to end up, but at least start yourself on a path and figure out what you want to do. You want to be in modeling and follow after the Blender bros and do hard surface modeling and make really, really cool stuff. Well, you can do that. You want to model, sculpt, and so on, and learn all these different workspaces. And it's a good idea to familiarize yourself with it, but stick with one thing. Don't jump in to Blender and try to learn everything, because you're going to give up really, really quickly, and that's a huge waste of time. Besides, if you learn Blender and you learn it really, really well, like in sculpting, which might be taken over by AI, so I would discount the impact of AI. Probably not sculpting, that's one of those specific things, but definitely hard surface modeling is going to be an industry that is going to always need people. Texturing, maybe not so much. You want to look into some AI videos and see what's going on out there. The geometry nodes, there's not going to be any AIs that are going to do that. They may have some presets and things like that they set out, but generally speaking, to get the specificity needed, you need the human on the ground to do it. And so a lot of these different things are going to be valid and be around for a long time, so don't be scared off by the introduction or the implementation of AI in the 3D field. And who knows, maybe you want to work with AI and build software for the program like I do, but then incorporate some different API keys and different things like that, and have links in here that are going to, which is one of the things I'm going to implement soon, and have an AI assist you inside of the program, which is super cool. So it's always going to be relevant having people do this. So yeah, that's it. I hope this has been at least informative. It give you a little bit of a direction, save you some time, because I jumped around to all the different people. And actually, there's one more guy. Yeah, here he is. CrossMind Studio. This guy is pure genius. I did his very first tutorial, Blender in 7 days. It took me a little longer than 7 days, but that's like the Blender Guru tutorial, and it's that quality. And then some of his other tutorials are very, very deeply involved in geometry nodes and exceptional. And I really think that geometry nodes is like the path that everyone should at least start out on, because you can non-destructively manipulate mesh in ways you cannot do in the 3D viewport. But you need the foundation of being able to work with the vertices, the edges, the faces, manipulate that, use modifiers, textures, and all that other good stuff. And then you'll have a good understanding of what's actually going on when you do get to the math portion. It won't be so scary because you'll understand what needs to happen. Anyhow, thanks for watching, guys. I really appreciate it. Smash that subscribe, smash that like on the way out, and happy blending. Let's get started.